It's Dave here. I'm on my lunch break, sitting in a rainy day in the parking lot of a Walmart in Fresno. So, why am I here? I just want to do a little video for you, and basically this video is an introduction to the Gospel of John. I'm very excited to be able to start reading and going through the Gospel of John together with you guys in our church body, and I just thought, what a way to set a foundation and to get going is but maybe by a little introduction to the Gospel of John, and then we'll be able to just dig right into his word on Sunday. So check it out. First of all, the Gospel of John, who wrote it, where and why. Here's what's cool about the Gospel of John. Even though there's some books of the Bible where authorship is debated and things like that, we have a great history from the early church letting us know that John the Beloved, John the Apostle, son of Zebedee, brother of the Apostle James, is the actual author here of the Gospel of John. And so check this out. Theophilus, Bishop of Antioch, in about 180 AD, he confirmed that, yes, John the Beloved, John the Apostle John, was the actual author of the book we call the Gospel of John. Clement of Alexandria, about 200 AD, same thing, confirmed John as the author here of the Gospel of John. And then this is the cool one right here. Check this out. Irenaeus, in 190 AD, he confirmed that John the Baptist not only was the author of the Gospel of John, but that he wrote it when he was at Ephesus towards the end of his life. Now, why is this important? Well, Irenaeus was the pupil of Polycarp. And Polycarp, we know from church histories, is great Christian martyr, bishop of Smyrna in the early church, died at the hands of Rome in the 2nd century. But Polycarp himself was an actual disciple of John. So we're getting this firsthand information from John's own disciple then to his pupil, Irenaeus, and it confirms that what Polycarp said to Irenaeus and is handed down to us is that while John was at Ephesus, he actually wrote here the Gospel of John. This will date the book from about 85 to 100 AD when John actually died of natural causes. So now we know John wrote this gospel. How cool is that? An actual eyewitness to these events, writing down the actual events themselves. And not only was John an apostle, but John was actually one of the three. He was one of the 12 chosen apostles. Then he take that a step further. He's one of the three that were Jesus's inner circle, and he was actually at some of the most intimate moments of Christ that get revealed here in the Gospel of John, whereas most of the other apostles weren't there. So what's the purpose? What's the purpose of this writing? Well, we have Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and they're called the Synoptic Gospels. And the reason why they're called the Synoptic Gospels is because they share a lot of the same information, the same events. There's a lot of repetition between those three Gospels. And whereas those three Gospels present Jesus as historical and physical ministry that was seen, heard, and experienced by eyewitnesses, well, John takes a little bit of a different approach because John interjects theology as well as spirituality into his gospel. So we're getting a different perspective. And if you want to think of it this way, think about John, the beloved apostle, coming to the end of his life. And now these other three Gospels have been circulating around. And he just knows there's some things that need to be said about Jesus, which maybe weren't totally covered in the other three Gospels. And so he felt the need then to write the Gospel of John, prompted by the Holy Spirit. And we have this book today. What's awesome about the Gospel of John is John, out of all the other Gospels, presents Jesus as the Christ man or the Son of God or the Messiah, God in the flesh. Whereas the other three Gospels present Jesus in his ministry as, threefold ministry as prophet, priest, and king, giving him the title, the messianic title that no one else could hold but the God-man. John's Gospel is much more prominent in showing us exactly who Jesus is. So that's, probably one of the main points to get out of the Gospel of John is the deity of Christ, and pay attention to how that's revealed and how John expresses that. So before we start jumping into the Gospel of John, so check this out, right? So why was the Gospel of John written? We just talked about John presenting Jesus in his deity. But here, if you go to John chapter 20, look at verse 30 and 31. John is going to share for us the key, the whole thing that unlocks the very purpose and what we need to know when we read the Gospel of John, the things we need to pay attention to. And listen to this. This is what John writes. And truly, Jesus did many signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name. So John points it out right here, right at the end of the Gospel of John. Why did he write the book? He wrote the book so that we could come to the full knowledge of who Jesus Christ is, and through that become saved. This book is about salvation. This book is about redemption. This book is about Jesus Christ, the God-man, coming down and reclaiming us as his own and offering us beautiful, beautiful life. Not only a better life here on earth, but a better life in eternity as well. So that's something to pay attention. Now you know why. Sometimes people just give out, or different ministries give out a pocket book of the Gospel of John, or they focus so much on the Gospel of John. Because if all you had out of the Bible was the Gospel of John, you could come to a saving knowledge just through the Gospel of John. That's how awesome this book is. So that's the whole reason that John says he wrote this book. Now here's some other things we want to pay attention to as we get into reading the Gospel of John. Some things I want you to kind of keep in mind as we're reading it and pay attention to. First, things I want you to look for and pay attention to, things that point us to the deity of Christ. There's 4 significant events in the Gospel of John, but I'll let you guys dig those out yourself. Also, 7 signs that Christ does to show his authority of who he is. There's 7 things that he does. And then probably some of the most famous things are the 7 I ams. There's 7 things through the Gospel of John that Jesus declares that he is. I am fill in the blank. Be paying attention to those things. Get to know these things. Really dig into what these things mean. Now, some interesting things about the Gospel of John. First of all, half of the book, the back half of the book, covers 1 week in the life of Jesus. 1 week. Half of this book is devoted to the Passion Week. Half of the writing of this book is totally devoted to from Passover Sunday all the way through to his death and resurrection. So John thought that was so important for us to know this, to pay attention and to know the things that went on during Passion Week, that he devoted half of this book just to that. Also, take note, there's some things that are totally unique to the Gospel of John that you won't find in the other Gospels. Matthew, Mark, and Luke do not contain these events. So pay attention to Jesus turning water into wine in chapter 2, the healing of the nobleman's son in chapter 4, his healing at Bethsaida in chapter 5, his healing of the blind man in chapter 9, the raising of Lazarus in chapter 11, and then, of course, the collecting of the fish in chapter 21. So these events are totally unique to the Gospel of John. So we want to pay extra attention to those because they won't be repeated in the other Gospels like so many of the things Jesus did are. And through repetition, remember, we learn. And the more we hear it, the more we're going to remember these things. So pay attention to those. And so, like I said, John has a purpose here. And his purpose is for us to come to saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. And as we get into the book of John, we're going to start in chapter 1 with where did Jesus come from? And where has he been before he came to earth? Chapter 3, where he lays it out for one of the Pharisees, Nicodemus. How can we be saved? What do we need to do? And then going into that Passion Week and this crucial teaching that he gives his disciples the last week he's here on earth. And then, of course, his death and his resurrection. Awesome book. One more thing I want you to watch for in the Gospel of John is Jesus actually tells us his reason for coming in the Gospel of John. And it may not be exactly what you think it is. So pay attention. Look for that, where Jesus says, this is my reason for coming. And then we'll be able to talk about that and kind of flush that out. But anyways, it's a great book. I'm excited. I'm pumped. I can't wait to dig into it with you guys. I love you guys. Let's go. Let's start. Let's go. Sunday morning. Boom. Actually, for us, It's Sunday noon, right? Which I'm thankful for those extra hours of sleep. But God bless you guys. I'll talk to you later. Bye.